Get that guy, go!
Okay, so I've been asked to talk about periodization and the whole concept of planning out a training program and developing, maintaining sharpness and fitness. There we go. So the first thing I guess comes to mind is just what is periodization? And it really is the deliberate manipulation of training variables to optimize performance. When done right, it'll prevent overtraining and it'll help in progressing the performance. So where do you start? Okay. And you start by designing your training plan. Start from the beginning. Okay. What are the key components of it? So there's and what strategy are you going to take? I mean, right now out there's 3 primary strategies. I guess you could have 4 or 5, but they're all kind of combinations of the same thing. The first one is linear periodization, and this is prioritizes developing specific running qualities like your endurance, your speed, your strength, in distinct phases of your training plan. So you're going to start out at doing a base plan. You're going to then, which is more aerobic capacity. Then you're going to go into more aggressive running, which is your aerobic strength. And at the end, you're going to taper to finish up strong for your end of the season championships. Okay, so the whole idea is involving increasing intensity while decreasing the volume of your training. Then there's conjugate training, which is, it's more of an advanced training, I would put it at. And what you're doing is you're training all the specific aspects simultaneously within the same training period. You know, you're addressing what you need to address at the proper time. And then there's a funneling periodization, which is more a combination of both, where you're doing everything, but you're starting at a certain volume and intensity, and you're funneling it towards the end of the season or towards the key race in your season. So for and there's benefits to all of them. Okay. Linear is well suited for student athletes. We're all working with student athletes, right? And it allows for a gradual increase of volume. You know, when you start out your first day of practice at the beginning of a cross-country season, you're going to have kids from all different abilities, right? And, you know, you're not going to be able to design individual plans for each one of them. So what linear periodization does is a general idea of building everybody up, and then as you start to try to focus on your championship seasons, you start to narrow down the intensity. I mean, you enhance the intensity and you're narrowing down the volume of what you're doing. So conjugate training is more suited for experienced athletes. So you might have a college athlete who has, you know, many races during the year in different seasons that he has to be ready for. They have their cross-country season and championships. Then they have their indoor training seasons for indoor track. Then they have outdoor track, and they have all of the summer championship things. Throw on top of that they're a distance runner and they want to run a marathon or they want to run a 10K. These people need to be able to adapt during the year to train for these different races, and that's one of the strengths of the conjugate training. Funneling, more of an emerging strategy, combines some of the best features of both linear and conjugate training. It can be difficult to implement, especially if you have varying levels of athletes, like we're talking about. You have experienced kids, seniors that are competing for a state championship, maybe are maybe more suited for this type of training than a freshman that's first coming in and has never really competed. So in a training, we're going to kind of focus on the linear periodization because we're all high school coaches, right? Most of us here. We're working with kids that are first coming in. So the basic building blocks of a training plan are like this. Let's talk about time. You have macrocycles, you have mesocycles, and you have microcycles. Well, macrocycle is just the whole training plan, you know, and it could be from cross-country season. It could be a year-long training plan. Say you're training for the Boston Marathon. But for our case, we're looking at high school kids. We're going to talk about probably 2 macrocycles, one being the cross-country season and one being the track season, right? So the mesocycles would be the training blocks within each macrocycle. So it can be lasting a few weeks to several months, each with specific focus. Microcycles, actual training periods within each mesocycle. They can be a single workout or a week. I tend to look at things in a 2-week period, a 14-day cycle. So if we look at high school training, your typical high school distance running calendar will have 2 macrocycles, like we had just mentioned. And each one will have a number of mesocycles. If we're looking at linear periodization, you've got a base building megacycle, which is your aerobic capacity. And then you have a pre-competition, what I call pre-competition mesocycle, which is your aerobic strength. And then you have a competition, which is usually the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, which is sharpening and tapering. Okay. Track and field, you might have as many as 4 mesocycles. I'm not going to really get into the track and field side of it here, but you do have, leading up to it, and then you're going to get into more specifics for the events that you're training for. So in a typical cross-country macrocycle, in a linear periodization, it's going to look something like this, where you're going to start out, everybody in a group, and you're going to start increasing volume. And then at some point when you're going to start working on your aerobic strength, you're going to gradually decrease the volume while increasing the intensity of what you do. Okay. And the final portion of it would be this tapering mesocycle, which you're really going to introduce a lot of rest, and you're going to rapidly increase the intensity of what you're doing. So now we got over the basic building blocks. How do you know where to go and how to do things? And I'm going to start borrowing from what some other people have said, talking about tracking. Okay, I would start, and we've always started here at Shadow Ridge by having a 5K time trial, and we get an idea of where everybody's at, and then we try to keep progress through the season for each athlete as they go. So the recording of where they are, and then use those stats to develop training groups and individual performance goals. I can't stress how important it is to have kids in groups of like abilities. If you send everybody out running together, some kids are going to get demoralized because they're getting way behind. Other kids are going to be pushing too hard. Get them in training groups. Get them to train together. And the best way to do that is run a time trial. See who's equal. You know, find out who's equal, you know. There's no shame in somebody being in group 4 as long as they have the ability to get to group 3. You can always, during the school year, if you're training them and tracking what they're doing, you can see where they are. So putting them in training groups is critical in my estimation. So some of the other basic building blocks that you're going to need in your training plan, need to understand. So we have the concept of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We've probably all heard about it. Basic unit of energy. It's produced in the mitochondria found in your skeletal muscles. Glycolysis. That's the process of breaking down glucose to form ATP. And then you have different energy systems, and we are probably all aware of those: aerobic, anaerobic, and creatine phosphate system. Okay, so these are the systems that you're going to be training during your periodization, and these are the things you need to understand and how and when. So. Any questions on that at all? I'll just keep going through. So, in looking at a typical linear periodization, you have your first mesocycle, which is aerobic capacity training. And that's, usually for us, it's the summer. We start in the summer. But as you can see, these happy runners running in Arizona along the coastline there. So in this first one, we're going to focus on aerobic capacity, using the aerobic energy system. It provides the foundation for all physical activity. It's a very complex and powerful, but relatively slow-moving energy system. So to give a better definition of that, for each unit of glucose, you're going to the aerobic system is going to develop 36 to 38 units of ATP. Quite a bit when you compare it to an anaerobic, which is 2 to 3 units of ATP. It's a very powerful system. Problem is it moves very slowly. But the byproducts of it are CO2, your exhaled breath, and H2O, water, which is in your sweat, your blood, your urine. So in this slide here, we're just kind of showing, how the aerobic system works. You're breathing in oxygen and you're delivering it through your circulatory system. Heart's pumping it down through the veins, right? Get to the capillaries, which are the tiniest little veins, and that's where oxygen exchange takes place with the mitochondria. And at that point, through aerobic glycolysis, the ATP is produced. Okay, and that's where you're getting your energy from. So in this first phase, we're going to build the aerobic capacity with some remodeling, which is a little bit of what Dr. Royer touched on, and some of the aspects of it. But as you train your body, it's going to remodel, okay? But this smiling guy here is Arthur Lydiard. And I don't know if any of you understand the importance of Arthur Lydiard, but he's pretty much the godfather of periodization. And he stumbled on this by accident. He went challenged to go for a run with a friend, the story it tells, and he went out for the run and he got absolutely gassed, and he couldn't understand how he couldn't keep up with this guy. So he just got into the habit of running every day and running a little bit further, running a little bit faster, and just stressing his body. And it finally dawned on him that this is the way you need to train to increase your ability. So he came through with this whole philosophy of training, and he started working with some of the clubs in New Zealand where he was from, and turned out some people that when I was first starting to run, they were your heroes. Peter Snell, I mean, guys like that. They ran the 800 and the 1500 and doubled in the Olympics in 1960 and 1964. I mean, these guys were great, and they all basically, it was a revolution. All these people started running much faster. Up before this time, it was Roger Bannister approach. Go out and run quarter miles and keep running them faster and faster and faster until eventually you can break a 4-minute mile. This is a whole radically different approach for it, and we can thank Arthur Lydiard for that. Through these processes that he postulated, let's say, and it's since become a fact and not a theory, I guess. Capillarization, increasing the number of capillaries that you have, the mass of the capillaries. Mitochondrial biogenesis, improved mitochondrial function, and strengthening the circulatory system. So, and this is all done, through running. All right. So, and it's all about the base. Some of the workouts that you would do would be your long runs, your threshold runs, your easy runs, your cruise intervals, your hill training, your fartlek training. So, some of the points, some of the things that need to be included with all this and when you're working on your base. Dynamic stretching before the running. Okay. Reinforce proper running form. Put in the miles. You've got to put in some volume here. Right? Vary the pace. Get used to running at different speeds. Most days run 45 to 60 minutes. And most importantly, have at least one long run a week. So, in Arthur Lydiard's day, he had a route, a famous route that went through the hills. It was like 25 miles or 24 miles. All of his runners would get together and run in a group, for 24 miles for a long run. They'd talk, they'd discuss things, but it's not a real, it's not an intense workout. It's a long workout. It's not an intense workout. So, a little bit more on the long run. So, continuous running stresses your circulatory system, right? And the body adapts by adding additional capillaries, okay? If you get out into that 75, 90-minute period of running, you're putting so much stress on your circulatory system, it's changing, and it's increasing capillaries so it can get more blood flow to your muscles, okay? Simultaneously, mitochondria is getting strengthened, becoming more robust. And just a little bit about mitochondria. If you go to a biology class, you look and it looks like a little kidney-shaped kind of thing and a piece of inside a cell. That might be the case in an organ, in your kidneys or something like that. In your muscles, it's a little different. Mitochondria looks more like a bundle of spaghetti or a bundle of wires going in there. And it will grow and it will strengthen and it will allow much faster delivery or much faster delivery of ATP to your muscles, right? Distance should be relative to physical condition, Do it by time. We always measure time. We say 75 to 90 minutes on a long run. So some kids will get 8 miles, some kids get 6 miles, some kids will get 10 miles. It's relative to your condition. Go by time. But a long run, should be focused on time. So the next workout that you might include in your aerobic strength area is the threshold run. Now, threshold, what is threshold? Scientifically, it's when you get a concentration greater than 2 millimoles of lactate in your blood. Just for our purposes, because we're not going to have the abilities to measure that. It's the point where you start having more dependency on your anaerobic system than your aerobic system. Okay, it's kind of, and it changes, and it's from different people. It's in different ranges. So I put it in there at 85 to 93% of a 5K pace. And that's just basically the old mantra that 5K is a 93% aerobic race, or 92% aerobic race, and 8% anaerobic. So, put it at about there. A lot of it can really go on your breathing. Some people use heart rate to determine it, but it's kind of a guess unless you get into a scientific kind of thing. But if you put it in that range, 85 to 93% of your 5K pace, then that's that's about where you're at threshold, depending on the person. So. When you have so if a guy's a 5K runner that runs 18:36, that's a 6-minute mile at his 5K pace. So his threshold pace would be roughly 6:27, or 93% of that 6-minute mile. So you can try starting out with progressive threshold runs. Matter of fact, I'd recommend that, because kids aren't going to be able to go right to threshold and hold it for a while. So go out, a mile of warm-up, then go get a mile at 85% of their pace, and then the next mile at 87, and then a mile at 90, and then finish up, with a mile at 92 to 93, and then do a slow down to the finish kind of thing for a cool down. So. You could also try substituting with alternations for this. Alternations where you're running at a certain level, you're running at threshold, then you go above threshold for a while, then you go drop down below threshold for a while, then you go back up. You can go in and out of threshold running. So. Easy runs, these are critical. We talked about this, a number of people have mentioned talking about having rest days. It benefits you in a lot of ways. The rest can prepare your joints and muscles and tendons for the stresses of harder workouts later. Because you're continuing to move and everything, it helps in the development of capillaries, mitochondria. You're still putting stress on your circulatory system. Promotes mental well-being. You're running in a group, you're talking, you're having a good time. These are not junk miles, okay? These are critical parts of a workout, okay? So we've talked, and some people here have talked about, alternating, having a hard workout followed by a rest day, followed by a hard workout, followed by a rest day. You don't have to be that structured. You could have 2 hard workouts followed by a rest day, as long as you don't overdo it. But they are critical. And these should be probably 2 to 4 times within a microcycle. So with me, with a 2-week microcycle, it works out well. We have them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have hard days on Mondays and Wednesdays. Cruise intervals. This is another way to get to the threshold. Again, you're trying to push that threshold, and you're trying to help your body develop. But cruise intervals will be just their general repeats. One of, for instance, if you're going to do 10 by 600s with a 90-second rest interval, you have a short interval, because you're not running. You're running at threshold. You're running a little bit higher than threshold, actually, on these kind of things. So if their threshold is a 6:36 mile, they might be running at a 6:20 pace. But when they finish, they get a short rest, because, they're really not working. They're not running a 5K. They're running a 600 meters. So they're running at a 5K pace. You give them a short rest. And this gives you the whole experience of running at threshold. So it's a good substitution for it. Also, hill training. Okay, these should be 1 to 2 times per microcycle. You run up the hill and down the hill. It strengthens the muscles. You can help improve form at this point. Helps prevent injuries. You're stretching and straining on all areas of the muscle. You're getting it all, giving a thorough workout, not compressing anything. This helps improve speed, and it really strengthens the cardiovascular system. So a lot of good benefits with hill training. And these are all things that should be important parts of that first cycle, the first mesocycle. So, and the last one we'll talk about is fartlek training. Again, this is speed play. Again, you're going up in speed and slowing down in speed. You're varying the paces, and you're creating load on the cardiovascular system. Probably once every 2 weeks, go out on a fartlek run. For those of you not familiar with it, you run in a group. You might run 400 meters at an elevated pace, and then you're going to slow down for 200 meters. Then you might somebody lead it out for another 300, kind of like the mystery workout that Coach Condon was talking about earlier. The great thing about this is all your freshman boys will think the name is really funny. So in putting it all together, here's a 12-day microcycle within a base within the aerobic capacity thing. Start out on Monday with cruise intervals. Then Tuesday you have your easy run. Maybe do some weights. Wednesday, a 60-minute threshold run. Thursday, another easy run, and maybe do some plyometrics. Friday, got your 60-minute fartlek run. Saturday, do a 90-minute long run. And then on Sunday, it's a complete recovery. You don't do anything. It's a rest day. Follow out the next week. Similar. Start with a 60-minute threshold run, then a 30-minute easy run, then a 45-minute hill training run. So you get the idea. Finish up with your 90-minute long run on Saturday, and Sunday's your recovery day. So, but that's how it might look. So we're assuming at this point you're not racing. Okay, so you're just running straight through. We're fortunate at Shadow Ridge in that we do a summer program every year, and we invite all the other high schools around. They all can send. Willow sent some kids this year. We usually have kids from Valley Vista. Some of the charter schools around here will send kids in, and we'll do that all summer. We'll start the week school lets out, and we'll go through August, or through till August when school starts again. So that's usually, working in about 8 weeks to 10 weeks of base, and that's how we do it. So, and you're welcome to send your kids there. We promise we won't recruit them. But it's good for them to have a structured group of people that do the same thing every week. So the next section of this is going to be devoted to the second mesocycle, which I'm going to call speed endurance. It's aerobic strength. So now you've worked on for 8 to 10 weeks. Now you've worked on your aerobic capacity. You're in good shape. What do you do next? How do you improve it? Okay. So at this time, it's a good time to refer back to your baseline of what you've done and watch what they do. Maybe run another time trial, see where they are, put them into groups again, and start working on the aerobic strength portion of it. So Talking about goals, how to establish goals. I mean, you need to have goals for these kids, figure out where are they going to go. I mean, how are you going to get there? So refer to your records, you know. Work with your athletes to set their season goals. We talked about setting goals, and ultimately we're talking about, I mean, there's all sorts of individual small little goals to do, but the ultimate goal is how fast you're going to run and how fast you're going to run a 5K. So work with your athletes, you know, show them what they're doing. Show them what they've done, you know, through using the stats that you've been keeping on them, and develop goals. This is the time to really say, okay, we've got our aerobic capacity developed. Now let's set the goals. What are we going to do? So, at the same time, you're going to be adding workouts to increase aerobic strength, but continuing to nurture and improve that aerobic capacity, because you don't want to lose that. Okay, so this is not a radical change. You're going to just add a couple different types of workouts. You're still going to be doing a lot of the same things, but not in the same volumes. So energy production during a 5,000 meter race is approximately 93% aerobic and 7% anaerobic. That's, you know, I think that's pretty common belief. And I think it depends a little bit on the athlete, but in general, it's good. So your speed endurance training should take this into account and prepare your athlete's body to efficiently process the byproducts of anaerobic respiration. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about anaerobic versus aerobic here. So again, we touched on it before. In anaerobic, the ATP is produced from glucose without oxygen, which is in aerobic respiration. We talked about it with oxygen, right? So the primary byproduct, we're going to call it lactic acid. It's lactate and it's hydrogen ions. But the accumulated lactic acid will inhibit muscle function. So as you get up there and you're starting to do more and more anaerobic respiration, and anaerobic respiration can really, if you're running an 800 meter race, the one that Rachel doesn't like. So if you're running that race, you know, you're going at the very end of it, you're going to be tied up and rubbery and falling apart, and it's just not a really good feeling at all until after the race. Then you get that second level fun, right? After the race, it feels good, but during the race, it doesn't. And realistically, you can tax your aerobic system or rely on your anaerobic system for about 2 minutes max, and it's going to shut your body down. It's that accumulated lactic acid, we're going to call it. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you're not going to radically change the training in this. You're going to add a few different types of workouts into the mix in order to maximize the results of your base building phase. You're going to reconfigure threshold paces based upon improvements realized during the base development phase. That's the reestablishing of goals. Okay, you're going to take a look at it and say, okay, we're not going to be, your threshold paces change because you've improved, right? So some types of workouts you might add or you might do more of. We have alternations. These are, again, you're running at threshold and below threshold. And what you're allowing your body to do, what you're training body to do, is process that lactate while you're doing this. So you're running at above threshold and you're creating lactate in your system, and then you alternate and you run below threshold and allow the body to buffer that, allow it to process it. And this is critical for a 5K race, which we're all running. Right? So, again, this mimics race conditions, and it should be run in groups of athletes with similar abilities. So, get your group 1 athletes are out there running as if they're running 17-minute 5Ks. Your group 2, the 18.5, 19-minute 5Ks, so on. So another type of workout, one that we like to do during this phase, is our date pace, goal pace repeats. So if we've established a goal pace of, again, a 16-minute 5K or a 18-minute 5K, let's say. Well, I've got it written right here. Date pace. If your pace right now that you can run is 18-minute 5K, and your goal pace is a 17:15 5K, so your date pace, would be a 3:36 1K, and your goal pace would be a 3:27 1K. And you would do 5 1,000-meter runs. Start out by the first week, you're doing 1 at your date pace, followed by 1 at your goal pace, followed 2 at your date pace, followed by 1 at your goal pace. So alternate them, okay? And give them a little bit of a break. But by week 5, you should be doing the majority of them at goal pace. So these are the type of workouts where you're increasing your aerobic strength. Try adding some speed ups or sprints to the end of an easier steady run. So you go out for a steady state run, you do 6-7 miles, you come back, get on the grass, do some speed ups, stress that system a little bit, and don't have to do a whole lot of them, but just do a few. Then we're going to go into the third mesocycle here, which is the final one, which is tapering and sharpening, getting ready for end-of-season championships. So now you've worked your first cycle, and you've developed your aerobic capacity. Then you've increased your aerobic strength to the point where you're really fit and you're really ready to go. Now you're taper, okay? So features of this are increased intensity, decreasing the volume, incorporating rest days, and focusing on freshness. Okay, you're going to be racing. You want to be fresh. So some things you might add: interval trainings. You'd be doing repeats at shorter distances. So now instead of doing 1000s or 800s, now you're doing 300s or 400s. Okay, you're doing much longer rest intervals, and you're doing these maybe 2 to 3 times per microcycle. But you're running much faster than your race pace. I don't have a good formula for you on that, but you might want to run at 110% of your race pace, okay, instead of running at 90. So other ideas: take it to the trails, make it fun. Hills are okay too, but just keep it fresh, vary the distances. Steady state runs. Just go out for a run. Steady state run, you're just running and you're talking, and you can increase the pace, run shorter, run in groups, finish up with sprints on soft surfaces, but get that relaxation in there, intersperse it between those hard days on the track, those fast days on the track, but intensity and less volume. Make sure to incorporate warm-up runs, cool-down runs. We talked a little bit about cool-down runs. In this time of your training, you're going to be doing a lot of anaerobic work, and you're really going to be creating byproducts in the system. And when you finish a practice, I don't think, and apologies, but I don't think the smart thing is to sit down after practice, after you've been doing a practice like that. Get a cool down run in. Help the body to process that out, because the next day you're not going to feel as bad. I mean, if you just sit down the next day, you're going to be sore. You're going to have, you're going to have muscle pain. So add those to it. Static stretching. You finish your workout, do some static stretching. Okay. So Again, putting it all together, this is what a 12-day microcycle within the speed taper thing might look like. Start out with an interval practice on Monday. Okay. I have here, race pace mile minus 40 seconds, for 400s, Tuesday, do a steady run for 40 minutes. Do 600-meter sprint stretching at the end of it. Wednesday, do a 40-minute threshold run. You're not doing 60-minute one, but go get out there and run at threshold. A couple 3 miles, start with a warm-up, finish with a cool down, do some stretching. Thursday, give them the day off or play a game, do something fun, but that's a rest day. And I know with the school program, you've pretty much got to have the kids there, practice. You could give them the day off, but if you can incorporate something fun, we play ultimate frisbee the other day I saw, things like that. Friday, go for a 30, 40 minute steady state run. Follow up Saturday, you have a race day, followed by a recovery day, and then do it all over the next week. Just important thing is get rest. Going to get some intensity in there. The volume is going to get smaller, and put in a lot of rest and a lot of stretching. Get ready. And that's about all I have on the presentation here. So I just kind of wanted to go through, and I hope I didn't put too many people asleep. So, any questions at all? Yes.
So how long can you stretch out that speed endurance cycle before you get concerned about kids quote, burning out?
Or overtraining?
Yeah, or overtraining.
I don't know. I tend to think of it as in a 6 to 8 week period is what you do. This is kind of neat. On wheels. If you sense them getting burnt out on it, switch it up a little bit, Yes?
As you're assessing athletes, and I know you're doing a lot of tracking, so I'm sure most of the data is coming from there. Have you ever found you have athletes who you're seeing a performance happening in practice that's not meeting up with their performance in time trials and things? What are some indications of when a kid needs to move up a group or move down a group pace-wise?
Well, I always go on performance in a race, and I think that's the ultimate thing. But yeah, there are kids that leave it on the track in practice, and they don't, so some of it has to be a little bit heuristic in your thought. You have to look at it and see that, okay, this guy, he ran 30 seconds slower than the other guys, should he be in the group that's 30 seconds slower than that? Or should he be in the upper group, and look at him and evaluate what's he doing in practice, Maybe he's a sophomore and these other kids are juniors and seniors, and maybe he's going to be up better than them next year. Maybe he should be training with them. There's a certain amount of free latitude you have. It's not all structured. You take a look at it, you evaluate it. What's the kid's work ethic like? I've had kids that'll go out there and just train and train and train. We've got a couple in particular. We got one this year. The last year she went out and she trained every day really hard, and she would go in and we'd have our morning workouts, and then she'd show up for distance in the track program, and then she'd show up in the afternoon for a workout with the 400 guys, or for the 400, 800 group, So it would, she did too much, and it showed up in her performances. But those are the things you have to evaluate.
I know, with your experience with track and cross country, you've seen changes. Some individuals are kind of more fast twitch and more prone to the 400, 800, and others are more distance, slow twitch type fiber, and just they do better with 5Ks rather than the 800 meter. do you, I mean, you already mentioned that like you kind of go it off of the time trial, but do you make any like special considerations to people that tend to go a little bit, like enjoy the faster stuff or enjoy like more of the endurance aspect? Or how do you approach that, the differences in different runners?
Well, you know, in cross country, when they're training for the 5K, I don't really, you know, they can run a little bit faster on their intervals and things like that. You know, I personally don't see putting them in like a separate kind of track of training. When it comes to track season though, yeah, I mean, these kids that ran distance in the fall that have a lot of fast twitch and are doing really well, we like to put them in the 400, 800 group, you know, and we consider that we have a little, I don't know if it's different anymore, but our approach to the 400, 800 is it's a separate group of its own. Some of the 400 runners will run 200 and could run an 800 if they want. But 300-meter hurdlers we would put in that same group. But it's all about the energy systems that they incorporate most in their races. And so, you know, some of these distance runners that really have a lot of fast twitch, when they get to track season, they'll be in that 400, 800 group, and they'll be working hard in that. But for specifically in cross country, I don't know that there's any way you can really, other than just let them have their way and run a little bit faster, you know.
They all have to run 5K, right?
Yeah, they're all running a 5K, so. Yes.
As you've been implementing programs over the years, are there things that you've kind of learned along the way and adjusted? Like, are there any changes you've made from, say, 5 years ago that you feel like have really impacted your team, or maybe there was new information you learned that you've incorporated?
Yeah, I mean, you're always learning, right? And you're always adapting. I think I've always been a proponent of doing a long run and doing some threshold work. But I think what I haven't always done in the past is put as much rest into it. And I'm really seeing the importance of the rest nowadays. So I think when I first started, some kids were probably getting a little burnout and were overtraining. And I was thinking back to my days. When I ran, we didn't have this kind of stuff. It was like everybody wanted to be like Pre, you know, and you wanted to go out and run hard and try to keep up with me, kind of thing. And so I've learned the value of rest and incorporating rest in there. So easier days. The other thing is doing the afternoon workouts a couple days a week. We've added that more for. You know, a couple different things with that. As we talked about blood plasma levels and the heat, you know, well, that blood plasma, I mean, it moves more red it moves more red blood cells. And so it's, you know, it's very similar to altitude training in that matter. It's a different thing happens, but, you know, you're still getting more oxygen to your blood, so to your muscles. So I think we've started to incorporate that. And also just, you know, just to acclimate them to the heat, because the next month or so when the races start cooking up here, they're going to be at 90 degrees, 85 degrees, even at, you know, 8, 9 in the morning. You know, you compare that to what kids in California are running in, you know, 65 degrees, and you see the time differences, and you know, it's so. Yeah, I've added the heat training in the afternoons. We do that on our Tuesday and Thursday days usually. So. Anything else? All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it.